Fuck?
I'm 36, bro. I got
You're
a few years on me.
36 years old, Hutch? Holy
36.
shit.
Yep.
Dude, you look
Yep.
young as hell. Oh my god, I look like I look older than you. What the heck?
You look. I don't know if you look. I mean, maybe a little bit. Yeah, you're kind of tall, right? How tall are you?
I'm 6'4". God damn, dude, you look young as
I'm
shit. You look
six.
younger
I'm
than
6'4"
me.
too.
You're
Yeah, I got a baby
36.
face. I look a little bit older if I grow out a beard, but when I
Well,
shave like this, then yeah, I got a little baby face going on.
yeah, same. Okay,
So,
so
so
I'm
we've
a
been
wet jagger because like life is pretty shitty, and I always say, you know, this is like one of the few instances of solace and comfort that I have back to myself. I mean, with myself alone. So I would rather maximize on the pleasure there, you know?
it just feels grosser to me. It just feels grosser. Like like when I don't know. It feels dirtier to me now because I actually yeah, just feels grosser.
Okay.
That's my take on wetjacking. Maybe you'll change your mind. Maybe you'll come around.
I don't know. Who knows? I mean, you can use spit too. It's just not like a lube thing, but everyone always cringes when I say that. Like they're like, "What the fuck are you using
No,
spit?"
I
It's
mean,
like,
I think that's probably what most people use when it comes to the wetjacking situation. But it's just kind of gross. You got like dried spit on your dick, and like,
so
what if you
what?
drank
It's
soda that
my.
day or like an energy drink? You got energy drink like residue
I
on your
mean, I
dick.
don't care. I think I've had way weirder shit than that than on my penis.
That's fair. That's fair.
Anyway,
Probably true. Yeah.
all right. So
We've had some disagreements in the DMs. So
have we? I mean, I don't know. I think we've
my
had some disagreements, but I feel like
minor.
it mostly stemmed out of I don't know, miscommunication maybe, but we do have some major disagreements in regards to like the scope of the impeachment.
Yeah, but I think but I'm actually starting to come around to your point of view. Uh, the only thing is like I think the Democrats have a valid concern to not stretch this out too much, uh, in case people start to view the entire impeachment inquiry and process as a political hit job instead of for legitimate reasons. Because I think there are a lot of people in this country that are simply not educated on what is happening right now and what happened with this phone call with Ukraine and what's potentially happening with China and other countries as well. I think he wrote letters to Australia and Italy and one other country trying to get them to
Yeah.
basically assist with his 2020 election campaign. I would guess probably like 50 to 60% of the country probably has very little idea of what's happening. And so I kind of understand Pelosi's desire to make it really quick and make it really concise and basically have it be the antithesis of the Mueller investigation, which was incredibly complicated and dragged out for 3 years in the press and then 2 years for Mueller's investigation.
Well, so as far as the Mueller investigation goes, I actually think one of the biggest problems that we ran into with the Mueller investigation was how narrow the focus of the Mueller investigation was because it specifically pertained to Donald Trump colluding with Russia, right? During the campaign. There
Not
were
just him,
plenty
but
of other.
his members of his campaign as well.
Yeah, him and his members of his campaign. But throughout that investigation, what we actually ended up finding was plenty of. I mean, there was additional discoveries that we could have used, or that we should absolutely be using now, in nailing him for impeachment.
You
The
mean
Michael
like
Cohen testimony.
the
What?
financial crimes that he passed off to the SDNY?
Yeah. So what I mean by that is like, I think that was a major problem with that was a major like the narrow focus of the Russia gate or Mueller investigation was one of the big problems, and because they couldn't convict him on anything else, they were just only focusing on collusion, right?
Well, wait,
And it
no,
was already
because
hard to stick. And then
the Democrats didn't take back the House until 2018, and they didn't, take over until January of 2019.
oh no,
So they
I
didn't have
know,
any control
and
over that.
they were mandated. It's not like they were purposely focusing on the only the collusion narrative. My point is,
Yeah.
why would we impose that same kind of restriction on ourselves now, especially when considering historically every other impeachment that has happened and it's never fully come to fruition, but like every other impeachment investigation has had numerous articles drawn, numerous investigations. It's never been hyper focused on one thing individually. And I think that that is how it should be done, especially in the case of someone like Donald Trump, who is insanely corrupt.
Yeah, see, now that I'm actually starting to come around. I mean, it's also partly been because the last week has been fucking crazy for news. It's like every day there's 5 or 6 stories that contain some kind of impeachable offense. Like, I love how last Friday Washington Post ran an article about how Donald Trump in the Oval Office in 2017, the day after he fired Comey, was talking with Kislyak and who's the other one? Lavrov. And he told them, according to WAPO's reporting, yeah, I know you guys interfered in the 2016 election, but it's not a big deal. We do it all the time, and everything's fine. Like, I think that alone, the fact that that hasn't been an enduring story, I think is indicative of just the landslide of news that is just cascading into each other from day to day. And so now that all this other stuff is coming out, like, I guess someone is reporting right now that the Trump had some communications with President Xi, is that his name?
Yeah.
In China.
Yeah.
And that was moved to a secure server too, or something. So I don't know I don't know if their plans are going to evolve, but I don't know how you keep it so narrow with all this stuff leaking in the last week.
So it didn't actually start last week. It actually started months ago. New York Times has been covering this for a while, but it never. It was never. I guess it didn't, like, people didn't freak out over it as they are now because there wasn't enough information. I think Trump revealing the transcript himself was part of the reason why this got a little out of control, and also because there was a whistleblower who overheard the back and forth with the Ukrainian leaders and Donald Trump and was very uncomfortable by it and tried to bring it up to the Senate Intelligence Committee numerous times, where he brought it up the ranks, and then it finally became a big deal. But this has been ongoing, and it's actually been well documented. The New York Times Daily talked about the extensive coverage that they've offered to Trump and Rudy Giuliani, communicating back and forth with like Ukrainian leaders and the prosecutor that you mentioned.
Yeah,
and they've been tracking this and covering it for months now. It's just
it's actually been
now.
pretty. If you pay it any attention, it's actually multiple places have reported the fact that Rudy Giuliani was like basically just traipsing around Europe trying to put pressure on Ukrainian officials to investigate Biden. Yeah, that's been out there for a while.
Yeah.
But what wasn't the case before was the fact that it's not the call itself that triggered the impeachment inquiry. It's the fact that whistleblower took it to the DNI. DNI took it to some counsel, some team of counsel, some lawyers who reviewed it, pushed it back to him and said, we find this credible and urgent. He then took it to the IC Inspector General, who reviewed it and interviewed the half a dozen Trump officials that were contributing information to the whistleblower's complaint and corroborated what they said, or at least found it to be urgent and credible. Directed the DNI to take it to Congress, at which point the DNI decided to go to the fucking DOJ instead. And then White House counsel instructed him not to give it to Congress.
It makes sense. It makes sense that they would do that. Obviously, even the original call itself was hidden as classified information, even though it was not a matter of national security. So, they're just trying to cover up their tracks, and they're doing it in a very they're not doing it in the greatest way possible, and as is expected from the Trump administration. But again, look at how narrow the focus of this is, right? We're only talking about the Ukrainian deal now, and even now it's becoming more complicated. So,
but do you understand why Pelosi would be a little gun shy? Because even though the scope of Mueller was fairly narrow, the substance of his findings was not very narrow at all. It was incredibly complicated, and you'd have to be pretty invested in the story to take the time to parse through everything and sort of piece together what actually happened. Whereas this offense that Trump committed and his administration committed is a very small, very what's the word I'm looking for? Describable. Like it's easy to describe what happened.
I know, but
like you don't need to write a 500-page report to explain to people why this was wrong to do it.
yeah. So here's the thing about that. First of all, we can get into that a little bit further. We can talk about whether or not that's true, even that like whether or not Trump has a defense on this issue or not. I don't think is as indefensible as we think it is. I mean, it is. It is bad. It is definitely bad. It's definitely flagrant corruption. It's definitely obvious. But if we're talking about it from the point of view of like Republicans and how they're going to view it, I think that they are making a case for it, and they will potentially make a successful case for it, especially if they only focus on the Ukrainian stuff. But that's not what I'm interested in. What I'm actually interested in talking about is is the fact that wait, what the fuck? I'm losing track. I haven't talked about politics in so long. My brain is not functioning. Hold on one second. What were we?
We were talking about Biden and whether or not there's any validity to the claims.
Oh, well, no, not that. No, we'll get to that in a second. God damn it, I'm fucking boomering out. This is why you're younger than me.
You need that Prevagen. They make it with jellyfish, man.
What?
This fucking commercial they show on CNN for this thing called Prevagen, which like keeps your mind sharp when you're getting old.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. As far as Nancy Pelosi goes, the scope of the investigation, we were talking about the scope of the investigation and whether it should be narrow or not. Okay, so the reason, like I mentioned earlier, the reason why we need to expand upon it and not just focus on Ukraine is because it's not just about like how the public views Donald Trump, because I think that can change. I think that absolutely will change down the line, just like public advocacy from the Democratic Party, as long as they build a decent enough case, will be able to change people's minds on Medicare for all. People's minds will change on impeachment as well. And that's exactly what is already happening. You see that impeachment is now more popular than it was before, right? It's increased in points. Its approval rating is increased. And that's because Democrats are now making a case for impeachment rather than stopping themselves from talking about it even.
And because Trump is making a case for himself just by being Trump and just not being able to help himself. Like he's making the situation a lot worse.
Certainly, that too. Donald Trump, but that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of the impeachment processes, which is that Donald Trump is so bad at covering his own tracks, and he's so bad at being corrupt. Like he has failed upwards his entire life. He's not good at even doing corruption. He's not good at hiding the corruption, and he has never had to because his father has bailed him out in the past. You know what I mean? And
he has the backing of the conservative media conglomerate.
He has the conservative media now backing him, which is very fortunate for him. That might change as well, but that's a totally separate conversation. But so it's the perfect way to get him. Like he's going to perjure himself. It's inevitable that he perjures himself. It's inevitable that he's going to obviously try to obstruct once again, and he's already doing it. He's not responding to subpoena requests, or he says he might not respond to subpoena requests.
Pompeo as well.
Yeah, so it's going to be a wrap. But if you exclusively focus on Ukraine, then the conversation becomes, well, Joe Biden has been corrupt as well. Look at Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden is a crackhead who got discharged from the Navy for testing positive on cocaine. And then, a couple months later, right as his father, the vice president of the United States, is like dealing with Ukraine, and there's a massive investigation into this, corrupt gas company. He's sitting on the board of this Ukrainian company. That's corruption. And it is corruption. It's corruption from a progressive standpoint. It's 100% corruption.
But you're mischaracterizing what happened. That's not what happened.
Go ahead. Make your case then.
So the top Ukrainian guy that was initially pushing for some kind of investigation into Biden. What's his name? Lukashenko, something like that.
Yeah, Lukashenko, I think is how you say it.
He came out like a year ago and straight up said after the fact that we looked into what was we looked into Hunter Biden. We couldn't find any kind of criminal wrongdoing whatsoever. When Biden showed up to put pressure on the Ukrainian government to fire General Prosecutor Shokin, the investigation into Burisma, which was the Ukrainian energy company that Biden sat on the board for, had been dormant for a year. So any kind of investigation that was going on into the company preceded Hunter Biden just showing up.
Wait, hold on. You and I are not in disagreement here. First of all, you and I are not in disagreement here at all in regards to like Joe Biden utilizing his powers of the office as the vice president to or to change the outcome of a potential investigation in Ukraine. That's a right-wing smear. That's a right-wing conspiracy. As a matter of fact, the entire the British investigation that was being conducted, or like the third-party investigation that was being conducted into Burisma at the time, all of the other people involved in that case applauded Joe Biden for calling for this prosecutor to be fired. So that's not what I'm saying at all. When I talk about corruption, I don't mean Joe Biden directly tried to influence the outcome of an election so that his son would be in a more secure or better position. Now, there is New York Times coverage on this as well that potentially says that is now shedding more light into the outcome of that investigation and how that could have potentially been beneficial to Hunter Biden as well. But I'm not even interested in that. When I talk about corruption, I mean corruption in the sense that like Joe Biden and his position was the reason why Hunter Biden got a job in Ukraine. Joe Biden also lied about never meeting with the or at no point whatsoever meeting with like anyone involved in Burisma.
Are you talking about the that picture, the golfing picture?
It's not preceding it's not before he got hired, but that's the reason why he got hired. That's my point. When I say corruption, I don't mean like Joe Biden is flexing. Joe Biden directly went and said, "Hey, you're going to hire my son and we'll give you a favorable deal." When I say corruption, I mean Joe Biden being the vice president is how Hunter Biden is able to secure a job like this.
How long had Hunter Biden been in international business before this Burisma dealing? Did he just hop into international business right when Biden became VP?
No, he had. Yeah, he had worked in he'd done an international consultancy in the past, but are you saying that like he had the like wherewithal and he was knowledgeable and that's why they hired him?
No, I'm saying I don't know. I don't know. It's possible, but you can't. I think what you're doing is you're jumping from the appearance of impropriety to the assumption of impropriety. I don't think it's unreasonable to suggest that the sons and daughters of politicians get favorable treatment in international business dealings. I don't think that you're off the mark by saying that. But to characterize it as Biden is the reason why Hunter Biden was involved with this Ukrainian company, like, can you confidently say that? Or I mean, how well versed are you in all?
I can confidently say that and the photo proves that the access was there. That's what I mean by that.
But the photo doesn't prove that though, because that was Hunter Biden's like longtime business partner who was a U.S. citizen. He wasn't they characterized him as a Ukrainian gas executive when it turns out that the guy was Hunter Biden's American business.
Yeah, they got hired together. They got hired together by Burisma. They got hired together by Burisma. There was a separate meeting with Joe Biden before they even got hired. Before they even got hired by Burisma. But and it was conducted in the White House. There's no transcript of the meeting itself. This is, again, I'm working off of like New York Times information, not like any of the fucking right wing smears or whatever. But they got together, and apparently, according to Joe Biden's account of the conversation, they were just talking about their children or their school or something, or like the school that their children are potentially going to go to, and then they got hired by Burisma together. Now, having said that, once again, Hunter Biden's credentials are not exactly excellent, and that this sort of stuff happens quite frequently. My point is, I don't like it when Republicans do it, and I don't like it when Democrats do it either. At the very least, I have a say in what Democrats can and can't do, because I then end up going out and voting for Democrats, right?
Yeah, but
and the fact that like he got hired by Burisma. What? Sorry, go ahead.
See, but I mean, I don't know. Like, I'd have to see what. I never saw that New York Times article. If you want to DM me a link to that, I'd appreciate you doing that. But I still think you're drawing a false equivalence between like Eric and Donald Trump Jr. and Hunter Biden. It's not the same thing.
Okay, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. No, let's talk about that. Why do you
what you call corruption? I would agree with you that it's inappropriate. Like, just if there's even the appearance of impropriety, then you shouldn't do it. And I think even ethics lawyers at the time acknowledged the fact that Hunter joining this. I'm on a first name basis with Hunter, by the way. That's why I call him that.
Yeah.
But when Hunter joined this energy company, he was creating a conflict of interest for his dad. But that's not enough for me to say, well, this undoubtedly makes Joe Biden corrupt. And I think when you use that kind of language,
no, I think everyone's corrupt. like everyone in politics is pretty shitty. Most people are.
But there are varying degrees of shittiness. And I think to put Biden in the same category as Trump, I think is woefully misguided.
No, I don't think that they're at the same level of corruption. But remember, it doesn't matter that they're not at the same level of corruption. If we're talking about public perception, it's all messaging and areas where you yourself or your team is also weak. Now, if Hunter Biden had never worked for Burisma, Donald Trump would, or the Democrats would have, or if Joe Biden wasn't even running for president, the Democrats would have a much stronger case by just exclusively focusing on the Ukraine stuff and saying, hey, we're looking into this. This is really fucked up. The fact that you're trying to conduct investigations into your political, like the fact that you're trying to conduct investigations into like American citizens that you feel threatened by or whatever. And I guess if it'd be different if Joe Biden wasn't running for president, but
if Biden wasn't running, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay. But let's say Biden is running for president, but Hunter Biden had, I guess there would be no investigation if Hunter Biden never worked at that company either. But like, if Hunter Biden had better credentials, for example, do you see what I'm saying? Like if Hunter Biden had worked for these sorts of consultancy firms, if Hunter Biden hadn't gotten gifts from foreign dignitaries and other corrupt companies in places like China to the tune of like hundreds of thousands of dollars, and if this wasn't like an ongoing thing in Hunter Biden's life, there would be less of a case for the Trump administration to turn around and be like, well, what the fuck are you guys doing? Like, I mean, you guys are corrupt and we're looking into it.
But that's not, but to phrase it like that implies that that's why Trump did it. Trump didn't do it because he had a legitimate suspicion that Hunter fucking Biden and Joe Biden were corrupt. He's doing it just to throw shit in the end zone. He knows that if he lobs enough accusations at his chief political rival, that Fox News and fucking Dave Rubin and fucking Ben Shapiro will just carry his water for him and ask 10,000 different questions. And it's sort of like what they did with Hillary Clinton, where there was, maybe 5 to 10% of the stuff that was coming out on social media were legitimate critiques. And then 90 to 95% of it was conspiratorial fucking nonsense like Pizzagate. And
I agree with you, Hutch.
Accusations that she used the Clinton Foundation as a slush fund.
I know, but what happened? But what happened to Hillary Clinton?
Right.
Who won the messaging war on that? I would say that the person who won the messaging war on that was absolutely Trump. So for the Democrats to exclusively focus on like a nearly identical case of failure when you yourself basically just admitted that like that turned out to be an absolute fucking failure for them, it blew up in their faces, is ridiculous to me, which is precisely why I think we should open up the scope of this investigation and draw up articles of impeachment for the numerous failures and numerous instances of corruption and numerous impeachable offenses that Donald Trump has engaged in.
Well, I'm going to say something you're not going to like here. I think part of the reason why Donald Trump won that messaging war when it came to the volumes of bullshit about Hillary Clinton that were being slung around on social media in 2015 and 16, it was because of people like yourself and people like Kyle Kalinske and people like the very vocal portions of the Bernie supporting, you could, if you want to call them far left. And I supported Bernie at the time too, but they gleefully indulged a lot of those crazy conspiracy theories and
can you point to any instance where I have or even Kyle Kalinske has engaged in conspiracy theories, like in regards to the Hillary Clinton campaign?
Not conspiracy theories, but I'm talking about the mischaracterizations and like take for example the Clinton Foundation. This idea that that Hillary Clinton was personally profiting or benefiting from the Clinton Foundation was something that I have seen Kyle Kalinske talk about.
Yeah, well, obviously, if it wasn't such a
big
big deal, if it wasn't such a big problem for the Clinton Foundation, they probably wouldn't have stopped getting foreign donations midway through Hillary Clinton campaigning, right? They would have been like, hey, if it's totally above board, it's totally legal, who gives a shit? We're going to continue to do it.
Well, I think they stopped it shortly before the campaign started, not because they were getting bad press.
Okay.
Somebody fact check me.
But if there were no problems, and if it was all above board, then why did they stop it?
No, it was the right thing for them to stop it right then because, well, I guess you do raise a good point there. But I want you to explain to me how you think Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton personally profited or benefited from a philanthropic organization that did a ton of really important work all around the world. They had like A ratings in transparency, and they had A ratings in their efficiency as a charitable organization. So I just want to understand. I want to understand why. So let's say some Saudi foreign national donates $25 million to the Clinton Foundation,
which they did.
Well, how does that?
So did the Ukrainians.
That's why I brought it up. So how does that personally benefit Hillary Clinton, and how did it influence her policy? I mean, what radical change occurred in terms of America's policy with those countries as a result of those donations?
Okay. So there are plenty of dealings that Hillary Clinton is. First of all, Hillary Clinton is incredibly influential in the Democratic Party, even to this day. The Clintons are incredibly influential in the Democratic Party, even to this day. They are feared, and they have a lot of sway. When they can easily have like a backdoor conversation and change the outcome of whatever kind of. I mean, change the outcome of numerous different things. But on top of that, Hillary Clinton was directly involved as the Secretary of State with Saudi Arabia, from any number of dealings with Saudi Arabia, from like arms sales to Saudi Arabia to not stopping the ongoing genocide in Yemen with Saudi Arabia. These are all things that play a part in the legalized corruption that we have in American government that I, as a progressive, abhor and constantly criticize. So I'm not going to stop myself from criticizing Hillary Clinton just because we're going up against like Donald Trump, who is obviously a much, much larger threat than Hillary Clinton.
Okay, so somebody in my chat saying, so the Clinton Foundation stayed up and running, but they would stop accepting foreign donations on the condition that she got elected. If she didn't get elected, they'd keep accepting them. I don't know.
Wait, I'm sorry. Can you say that again?
But you didn't answer my question though. How did our policy change after these donations occurred, and or how did it personally benefit Hillary Clinton to have the Saudis donate $25 million to a charity organization?
Donating $25 million to Hillary Clinton's charity opens up doors for whoever is donating that kind of money, or opens up doors for the Saudi royals to continue to have an ongoing communication with Hillary Clinton as she's in a position of power within the White House at the time. So just because American policy already had favored Saudi Arabia for the past 20, 30 years, as we consider them one of our most important strategic allies, does not change the reality that without those donations, or without that kind of access, without that kind of funding that continues to funnel into the highest echelons of power in American politics, that we would continue to never deal with Saudi Arabia, or we would continue never to stop Saudi Arabia from.
Saudi Arabia and Ukraine have both been really important strategic allies to the United States for fucking decades. So I feel like you haven't. I get what you're saying about appearances, and I think like there are a lot. I
agree, but think about it. Why is Saudi Arabia a strategic ally instead of Iran, for example? Saudi Arabia is the number one funder of Wahhabi extremist terrorism and terror cells all around the world. So the Saudis have been linked. The Saudi royal family.
I'm not defending our.
Okay, but they're our number one
alliance.
strategic partner. Why are they our number one strategic partner? One, because they have a lot of money, and two, because they have a lot of access to American politics. That's entirely the point that I'm trying to make. Just because it's consistent does not change the reality that it's not inherently a corrupt relationship that we have with a theocratic monarchy. That is.
I share some of your concern and critiques about the appearance of impropriety with regards to the Clinton Foundation. What I don't share is this idea of just lumping all of that kind of stuff in with, say, renting out a bunch of rooms at a Trump property and then just leaving them empty because you think it's going to curry favor, or, booking
It's
events
all about
at
access.
a Trump golf club or something like that. It's not in one of those circumstances, the financial outcome directly benefits Donald Trump, and in the other circumstance, Hillary Clinton did not personally profit from people donating money to the Clinton Foundation. I think that's where
it's about access though. Still, like the reality for the Saudis is still the same, which is grease the palms of whoever is in a position of power, give them money, and we will continue to have a favorable.
But he didn't give Hillary money. He gave a charity money.
No, still, I know, but ultimately it's still prestige. There's still plenty of benefits that Hillary Clinton gets from that. Like, do you think that Saudi Arabia was doing this out of the kindness of their heart? And do you think that the Clinton Foundation had set up this charity out of the kindness of their heart? Because if that's the case, then I guess we're having a very different conversation. But a lot of times these sorts of charities are absolutely built for like exactly what we're talking about: backdoor dealings, money exchanging hands in the way that it does, and building up prestige for world leaders.
No, if anything, I agree with you that was the Clinton Foundation. Now, the Clinton Foundation was being run entirely separate from her, right? Like during her time as Secretary of State, she was not working at the Clinton Foundation, nor was she involved in any of the decision-making process, if I'm not mistaken. But even still, I do agree that just to avoid any appearance of impropriety whatsoever, they probably should have stopped accepting foreign donations while she was serving as Secretary of State.
Yeah.
Did they accept foreign donations while she was Secretary of State? I think that was the big thing, right? And if that's the case, then I agree. Not because I think that Hillary Clinton fucking benefited personally from the Saudis donating money to a charity, but because of the appearance of it. If you can't even give right-wing media any ammunition, because if there's the appearance of something, then they'll just jump to the conclusion that, okay, well, this thing must be fishy, much like what they're doing right now with Joe Biden. Some of it's bad faith, some of it is
there was an ethics agreement with the Obama administration that placed certain limits on contributions during Hillary Clinton's tenure. It was designed to avoid the impression that foreign governments could curry favor with the top U.S. diplomat by supporting the foundation that her husband started. But that agreement did not stop donations from governments entirely, from foreign governments entirely. Contributions from governments that had given before Clinton took office were allowed, provided that those donations not represent substantial increases over past giving. So if, let's say, Saudi Arabia had given you money, Saudi Arabia could continue giving the Clinton Foundation money because of exactly what you're talking about right now, which is that, like, well, they didn't increase the amount of money, so there is no there's no reason for Hillary Clinton to.
They probably should have stopped the payments altogether. I mean, not probably. They should have. But when you characterize what happened with the Clinton Foundation and make an equivalent between what's happening right now at Trump properties all over the world, and Air Force being diverted to a Trump property in Scotland, and then in turn diverting business to an airport that they're trying to keep afloat that's near that property and adds value to the property. I don't think you can.
Hutch, that seems like a really, really terrible thing that the Trump administration did. If only the Democrats would include that in their articles of impeachment.
Yeah. But I'm saying, like,
you are not in disagreement. You and I are not in disagreement here. I think that we should do that. We should also pursue the numerous ethics violations that the Trump campaign and the Trump administration has engaged in since taking office. That's literally my point. My point is that there are plenty of other things.
I'm coming around to your side of it, but I totally understand why Pelosi wants to make this about wants to narrow the focus, because you don't need anything else. This is such a cut and dry abuse of power and abuse of the office of the presidency. You don't need fucking 53 articles of impeachment when you have the president of the United States admitting to doing the very thing he's going to be impeached for on the South Lawn of the White House this morning. So as long as and we've already seen the needle move like 13 points in favor of impeachment in 1 week. That's just in 1 week before there are public hearings and all these other kinds of things. I tend to think you're probably not going to get above like 65% in favor of impeachment. And I think 65% is a fucking stretch.
What do you think? What do you think are the negative consequences, though? You're saying that like opening up the scope of the investigation to other, improprieties, or what is it? Is that the right word? I don't even know what the fuck I'm saying anymore. Opening up the scope of the investigation to other misdealings, the other flagrant abuses that the Donald Trump administration is engaged in is bad because it'll confuse people. But that's what you're saying. But then we talk about the incredibly narrow focus that the Russia investigation had, and you're saying that confused people. And then we talked about Ukraine, and that even confused both of us when we were talking about the back and forth and like how that corruption or whatever, how that law breaking happened, like how we got here. Even that part is confusing. Everything is confusing. It's all a matter of hitting Donald Trump as much as possible for all of the numerous different violations that the Democrats have been crying about since Donald Trump became president. That's my point. Because if you talk about Donald Trump violating our norms, if you talk about Donald Trump eroding our constitutional checks and balances on a daily basis, as the Democrats have done, and then turn around and only start an investigation and an impeachment inquiry as soon as Donald Trump attacks Joe Biden, it only looks like you just care about protecting your boy, and you don't necessarily care about all the other shit that you've been saying for the past year and a half, or 2 years, 3 years.
I think that I think the Democrats, I think Schiff and Pelosi and Nadler would have reacted the same way if they found out about a whistleblower complaint that had been suppressed about Bernie Sanders. I think we would still be here, because that is such a, like, I personally think that there was more than enough in the Mueller report in both volumes 1 and fucking 2 to impeach the president, but it wasn't enough to move the public opinion needle. And so Pelosi, in her infinite wisdom, decided to just not pull the trigger on that. But this was such a simple, abject example of corruption to work to suppress a whistleblower complaint to Congress. And I think it's way more marketable to the American people. I think you can change a lot more hearts and minds with something as simple as this, contrasted with, because if we start throwing every little fucking thing that Donald Trump has done into these articles of impeachment, and there would literally be like 1,000 articles of impeachment, I think.
I mean, no, you don't have to have 1,000. I think 6 would do. I think we should tailor it off of the Nixon impeachment, which was one of the more successful ones. I mean, we don't know what the outcome would have been if Nixon hadn't resigned, but I think that that's a pretty good one to model it after. Even the people that worked on the Nixon impeachment at that time claim that there is plenty to impeach Donald Trump on, and that they should include some of these other violations.
Well, he will be impeached. And the only way that he will be convicted in the Senate is if public approval goes up for impeachment another like 10 points, which is going to be difficult. Like I think the public approval for impeachment at the time that Nixon resigned was, I think, right around 60%. Like they didn't even need to get it up to 65, 70%. And that was enough to ratchet up enough public pressure for these Republican senators to show up at the White House and be like, yo, you need to resign or you can face criminal liability and conviction in the Senate.
Okay.
And, all we need to do is move that needle up like 10 more points. And so while I think I'm starting to come around to your point of view that I think it would probably be better to not just focus on Ukraine, I don't think that we should go back and relitigate the Mueller report. I don't think that we should go back and relitigate like every little thing that he's done.
I know,
like,
which is precisely why another
fine.
Slavic country being brought in, another Slavic country that is like supposedly supposed to be our ally to our dealings with Russia, which is regarded as a foreign adversary, like bringing that in and like having Russiagate 2.0, which is largely seen as a failure in the eyes of many Americans at this point, is kind of why I'm terrified. It's like one of the many reasons why I'm terrified of narrowing the focus of this investigation to Ukraine exclusively, because it has a stink of, well, these guys are Russian and these guys are a different kind of Russian to it. You know what I mean? Not saying that they're even remotely related, but if we're talking about it from the public approval point of view, which I don't even give a shit about, to be honest with you, I don't give a shit about the public approval at all. I'm only following along with the public approval because most people care about it, and I know you care about it. You bring it up, but for me, these are very obvious violations, and that's why they need to be addressed, and that's why they need to be documented. I don't even think Donald Trump is actually going to get impeached. I mean, I think that he's going to get impeached in the House, but I don't think he's actually going to. He's actually going to get convicted in the Senate, and the reason for that is something we can get into if you want.
It really depends on what comes out in the next like 2 months, because they want this thing. The Democrats want this thing done by I've heard some people say done by Thanksgiving, like they want it done like well before the end of the new year. But I want to like, before we get into that, like whether or not he's going to be acquitted in this acquitted or convicted in the Senate, I just want to go back real quick to, you talked about the Mueller report and it not being enough to move public approval, and you sort of brought it up in the context of making the case that that's something that the Democrats didn't do a very good job of. And while I think that there is some truth to that they didn't quite nail the messaging as well as they could have, I think the fact that the needle didn't move after the Mueller report dropped is more of an indictment of the American public and the American media than it is the Congress. I think we have a simple case of just a lot of people just didn't bother to read it. They didn't bother to read the cliff notes. They didn't bother to put any kind of effort whatsoever into absorbing all the information that was presented in that report, which was ultimately very damning of this president. And I think that's a reflection of more of a reflection
Hutch, he
of
obstructed justice on national television. He went on Lester Holt's show and literally said, I fired James Comey because he was investigating, because he would not say that he was loyal to me, or that he was investigating me and my dealings with Russia. So I know, I understand. I mean, this is a very shameless administration, okay? And I think that shamelessness is absolutely a weapon. They are weaponizing this. And we're coming to find out that the Republican Party does not give a shit either, and they will just back Donald Trump as long as the economy is doing fine. So I am aware of all of these realities. I know that most people in America don't give a shit either. They are just either in love with Donald Trump because he's appealing to them, and they find him to be charismatic, and he's owning the libs or whatever, or they fucking hate him and think he's rude and awful and all that stuff.
Or what I care about, too busy or disaffected to give a shit. That's another big segment of the country. They just look at everything and they say everything's corrupt and both the parties are the same and nothing matters, and fuck it, I got bills to pay. I don't have time to sit here and watch CNN all day and figure this out. Sure.
What I do care about, however, is making sure that there is historic documentation of the widespread corruption of the Trump administration. And if the Democrats are claiming that Donald Trump has done all these things, as they have for the longest time, they should probably follow through on it. It's kind of like saying, being like, yeah, this person robbed the bank. On the way to robbing a bank, this person also shot a police officer and then kidnapped a child. But let's not focus on the kidnapping of the child, and let's focus on just the bank robbing element. I don't care.
Sure.
This person is obviously corrupt, and he has done corrupt things, and we have to prosecute him on that one way or the other, which is precisely why I think it's insane and also self-defeating to narrow the scope of your own impeachment investigation. It makes no sense to me whatsoever.
Well, you kind of glossed over public opinion before. You said I don't really care about public opinion, but public opinion is, in some respects, the only thing that matters in this process. It's not the facts that matter so much as the public's reactions to those facts. And if they can't move the needle, they're not going to get anywhere. They might not even be able to impeach him in the House if they don't move the needle.
I'm confused by that. What do you mean? Do you mean like public opinion in regards to? Wait, I'm sorry. What do you mean by
moderate Democrats or Democrats that are serving in districts or states that Trump carried? They have a difficult decision to make And if they don't have majority support in their own districts, then you might see some of them gun shy when it comes to impeaching the president. That being said, if they're in favor of an inquiry, which I think it's up to like 225 now or something like that, then chances are they're in favor of impeaching at this point. And
no, they're in favor. Yeah, exactly. But if we're
but
even if we're going to talk about
you can get 20. I think we need 20 Republican senators to vote to convict. You can get that to happen as long as you present the information in a clear and cogent way, and as long as more bad information continues to come out. And we're starting to see like tiny little cracks in the Republican base right now, just tiny little cracks. It jumped to like 5%. So 5% of Republicans were in favor of impeachment before. Now it's 10%. So that's something. And then also you're seeing people like Pence come out and defend himself in a way that kind of makes Trump look bad. Like Pence is coming out and saying, well, when I talked to Zelensky and told him that there wasn't going to be any financial aid coming from the United States, I didn't know that he actually had pressured Zelensky to investigate Biden. And then Pompeo is similarly defending himself from Rudy Giuliani, because Giuliani is now wrapping up the State Department in this whole thing. And so these people are not loyal to each other. They're only loyal to power. And as long as we keep the pressure on, you could see the facade of unity really crumble. And that will affect public opinion. But if you overwhelm the public, then you risk, I think, what happened with the Mueller report, which is the public was just too inundated with information.
Yeah, no, I disagree. I think that, again, I think that like in order to change the public opinion, we need to make the case. And the most effective case that we can make is all the things that we've been yelling about for the past, 4 years now almost, are all true. Here, we're going to start an investigation and an inquiry into all of those things. If you leave that on the table for no reason whatsoever, then the Trump administration can actively tailor this messaging around Ukraine, expose the, again, corruption from their point of view, expose the corruption to the Republicans, make the case to the Republicans that Joe Biden is corrupt as hell. Look at him. Look at his cocaine addict son who got a $50,000 a month job in Burisma. Wait, hold on. Let me finish. If messaging warfare is what we're talking about and public approval is what we're talking about, and you think that public approval is the only reason why politicians are going to go one way or the other on this matter, and that none of them have their own actual opinions or genuinely care about corruption or even the or bringing anyone to justice here, then the best way to do that is not by focusing on just Ukraine, a case where the other side could actively and deliberately craft a counter message that is demonstrably failed in the Hillary Clinton election as well, and that was not that long ago. And you admitted that it failed with Hillary Clinton as well. So, I know
Hillary
that
Clinton was a different story because the Republicans had been working for years to build a catalog of things to go after her for. Biden is problematic just by simply virtue of the fact that he was attached to the Obama administration and they fucking hate Obama and they'll go after him regardless. But he's not as problematic as Hillary Clinton, which isn't to say that I support him, because I'm not saying that, but I'm saying he's not as, just objectively, he is not as problematic as Hillary. And
of course not.
I kind of disagree with you about the right being able to spin this Ukraine thing. It is so bad. The premise of asking.
I think. Wait, hold on. People didn't understand what you were saying. Wait, 1 second. Hutch, sorry to cut you off, but people didn't understand what you were saying. You said that Joe Biden is nowhere near as problematic as Hillary Clinton in regards to corruption, or even didn't have a catalog of
bad press.
Yeah, didn't have a catalog of offenses that were well documented and also had entered mainstream politics. I agree with that. Joe Biden has plenty of awful things that he has done. Joe Biden is more conservative than Hillary Clinton. Joe Biden has done awful things in regards to successful legislation he's passed and whatnot. But, however, having said all that, it's nowhere near as sexy and as conspiratorial as the Hillary Clinton scandals, the numerous Hillary Clinton scandals that have wrought American body politic for decades now.
Yes. That's
Sure.
exactly what I mean. Yeah.
You're right. You're right on that for sure.
But I'm saying like the whole premise of them withholding financial aid, that alone doesn't make any sense. The Pentagon has already the Pentagon contradicted them because now Trump said it was for a couple reasons that he didn't want to give them financial aid, but the main reason he said was that he was concerned that Ukraine wasn't doing enough to fight corruption. Okay, well, we have a report from the Pentagon back in like May that said that in fact Ukraine was taking substantial steps to address corruption in their country. So that right there undermines that whole narrative. And the idea that and the whole Hunter Biden Burisma thing is just so, it's not, you can't even call it thin. It's just a nonsensical accusation. It doesn't make any sense. If you look at just a few fundamental truths and facts,
can we quickly
it makes no fucking sense.
Can we just quickly talk about, let's just isolate what I mean when I say corruption before we get into this conversation, because like I think this is our point of contention here, and we're miscommunicating. We're talking past each other. When I say corruption, I mean nepotism. Okay, I mean nepotism and elitists, the elites in positions of power putting their failed daughters and failed sons in corporate positions that they did not earn, and they're doing it exclusively. And these companies are engaging in this behavior exclusively because they are going to have access, right? This is this is just like one step below quid pro quo, or this is basically one step below like directly giving money to the family of the person that you are trying to talk to, right? Or the person that you want to have access with. You agree, right, with that? For example, Ted Cruz's wife getting hired by Goldman Sachs. What would you consider that?
I don't know anything about Ted Cruz's wife. I don't know if she had any history in finance. That's the thing. It's like we can have conversations and speak in these grand generalities and just make all kinds of assumptions. And you're probably right most of the time that these people are wholly unqualified and they are boosted financially and socially because of their associations. Like that sort of shit happens all the time. That they blur the lines between the private sector and government workers. And I can understand that generalized argument, but for you to say that, and you keep calling Hunter Biden a crackhead, people abuse drugs and then get off drugs. I don't think that should be disqualifying.
No, I agree. I don't have a problem with that at all. I think addiction should not be stigmatized. But when we're having a conversation about a really high-profile job sitting at the board of a foreign company, I think that you getting discharged from the Navy for testing positive for cocaine absolutely does play a part in this. Also, he did crack after that, for the record. Just
I don't know anything about that.
So anyway,
but how much do you actually know about Hunter Biden? Like, how much do you actually know about his business acumen?
Did you read the article I sent you from the New Yorker? This was like 2 months before this stuff even came to fruition, but it was like 19 or 14 or 15 days before Donald Trump made that call to Ukraine.
I think I skimmed it, but that was I think a while ago.
Okay, well they profile his very interesting history quite extensively on it. And the point is, like, you cannot leave that article thinking that like Hunter Biden has ever actually maintained a position, because Hunter Biden has ever actually maintained a position in both the Navy or any other place that he has earned for himself. Like, that's just what it is. Like,
okay, yeah.
And there is a long history of this happening. This happens with like people like Chelsea Clinton all the time too. I can't give you exact examples of Chelsea Clinton, but like it happens. And obviously, I am a beneficiary of nepotism. So like, it's kind of interesting that I'm talking about this right now. But there is a difference. I have a poli-sci degree, and I worked for a fucking 26-person online news network. My uncle's online news network that had 26 people. It's a startup. I'm not sitting on the board of a massive Ukrainian gas company that is currently under international investigation because my father is the vice president of the United States.
I don't know enough about your situation with Czech, and I don't know enough about Hunter's situation with his dad to even speculate about how he got these jobs and how he got these connections. But I mean, I'm not saying it's totally far-fetched or even unlikely that he forged a contact list, a very powerful and influential contact list, or got certain jobs or got certain connections because of who his father was. But I don't think that that's enough for someone like yourself to go out there and say, well, this is airtight evidence that Joe Biden is just as corrupt as Donald Trump.
I'm not saying they're no. I've never made a moral equivalence, Hutch. I've never made a moral equivalence between the rampant corruption that has permeated through every fucking hole in the Donald Trump administration versus the regular kind of corruption that's more banal, more boring that the Democrats engage in quite frequently. Do not think that I'm.
If I were to go back a few days on your Twitter account, I think you tweeted something and then Kyle Kalinske retweeted you and quote retweeted you or something like that, and you said, if anything, this. I'm paraphrasing here. You can remind me what you said, but if this, the funny thing about this whole Trump investigation is that it will reveal that Joe Biden is corrupt. And what I'm saying, when you use language like that, I feel like you are sort of doing some of the legwork for.
But I believe in that. It's up to you to, I guess, at this point, to disprove that like it's not corruption to have a consistent fail son, like get into a position of power like this with a foreign company that is also being investigated for corruption at the time. Like you have to, I guess, at this point, prove to me that like Hunter Biden deserved it. Because I can tell you why he didn't deserve it. I can give you his track record. And I can also tell you numerous other times where he's like taken gifts from foreign leaders or sat in a similar position of power. And it's always suspiciously, I mean, again, it's somewhat linked back to his relationship with his father, obviously. And
I think this conversation is a moot point because I don't think Biden is going to win. I really don't. He's slipping.
Okay,
he's been slipping.
But you wanted to have this conversation about impeachment, so that's why we're having this conversation.
No, I did, and I'm glad we have had this conversation. But I just want to throw that in there, that all this conversation is kind of somewhat moot, because I just don't see, like, Biden is currently trailing Warren in Iowa and New Hampshire, and he's now
he also raised much less money this quarter than Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and even Pete Buttigieg.
And Buttigieg.
Yeah, well, Buttigieg is getting a lot of money from like big party donors. Elizabeth Warren is more so focused on like independent small donors. But yeah, the Biden campaign is falling apart. But what doesn't but again, that doesn't change the reality that the Democrats should not exclusively focus on this. That's been my point since day one. I never made a moral equivalence between what Biden has done versus what Donald Trump does on a daily basis. And also, I am simply stating that because there is problems there with the potential relationship that Hunter Biden had and his proximity to Joe Biden, it's not strong enough on its own to convict someone like Donald Trump, because they're going to counter message it, and they have been, and they're going to continue counter messaging it. And again, there's plenty more on the table that we're just leaving for no reason in regards to impeachment investigations.
Yeah, I see, but I hate to both sides it, but I do see both sides on this one. I see the upside of making it compact and expedient, and I also see the upside of working a little bit more diligently to bring other matters to the forefront, because there's so many different things that could qualify as an article of impeachment that have been reported in the national news, but there are still a lot of people out there that, for one reason or another, maybe they're busy, maybe they're just not very interested, they still haven't heard half the stories, half these impeachable offenses. And I think bringing
which is why that meme works really well.
Inquiry would actually bring it to the forefront, would actually expose a lot of people that didn't know that this thing happened. It would give them the tools to inform themselves in a way that, running a headline in the New York Times would. So I don't know where I land on it. I think I'm okay with either. Like I don't agree with you that Pelosi narrowing the scope and wanting this thing to be expedient is necessarily like a sabotage or a complete fail. I guess time will tell. We'll just, if it works, she'll be a genius. If it doesn't work, she'll be a pariah.
Probably. I mean, God, I have so many problems with this too. Like, I think that the impeachment investigation should have started way before this Joe Biden stuff. Like, I've been calling for this for a while. I actually started calling for it in the aftermath of the Robert Mueller. While I was very skeptical of the Russiagate stuff, and very openly so, once the Mueller investigation was concluded and we had all of this information, we had Michael Cohen testimony about Stormy Daniels, I said that this is the time to now continue and try to impeach Donald Trump. The reason why we should have done it back then is so that we had enough information by the time that we had enough information that we had collected, so that by the time that this became like an election cycle conversation, that we could just point to the numerous violations and the concluded investigations into those numerous violations and confidently say, this is Donald Trump. Here are the articles of impeachment. This is your president.
You know what? The Russiagate stuff, the Russian interference in 2016 stuff, that shit just rubbed a lot of Bernie supporters the wrong way, because I think a lot of Bernie supporters saw when Hillary lost and then she was quick to blame Russian interference. I think, and a lot of people in the media were saying the same thing at the same time, ignoring the fact that it was numerous things that came together to make that Donald Trump victory possible. It wasn't just one thing or the other. It was like literally 10 different things. But a lot of Bernie supporters couldn't fucking stomach the idea of Hillary passing the buck and not taking responsibility for running a pretty fucking objectively shitty campaign. And so a lot of them just dismissed the Russian interference stuff outright. And they totally agreed with the Ben Shapiro's of the world. When
what do you mean?
Said there was I saw a lot of Bernie supporters coming out on social media at the time and saying, like, there's no way a few memes on Facebook could have altered the course of this election. And they parroted the same line that Donald Trump used in the Oval Office when he said, well, the United States has interfered with elections all over the world. I think a lot of people in Bernie's camp completely.
Well, first of all, that is true. The second part of that conversation is absolutely true. The United States does much worse things to influence the outcome of elections worldwide.
Of course, for decades. But to use that as a way to legitimize what Russia did in 2016,
so
to minimize the impact of it, I think was something that, like, it would have been one thing if Democrats were unified around what the Mueller report stated, but the people, not just Democrats, but people on the left in this country.
Well, how much power do you think people on the left have in the Democratic Party, or even in mainstream media, really? Like, it's just Twitter stuff, honestly. I mean, I'm not just like dismissing it by saying it's just Twitter stuff, but the reality is it is just fucking Twitter stuff. Unfortunately, I wish that those outspoken leftists had more of a say in what happens in regards to electoral outcomes, or in regards to policy decisions that the wonk class is contributing to, but that's not the reality. And also on top of that, like, I think what most people said is, and this is my take on the issue, there is no doubt that Russia tried to, and also successfully in certain instances, influence the outcome of our election. Okay, there is no doubt they hacked into they breached our election software. Like, they had access. This is all well documented. The only person the first person who actually went to jail that was involved in this is the whistleblower Reality Winner, who is now serving a prison sentence. Like, the only person that we locked up, or the first person we locked up, was the person who blew the fucking whistle on Russian interference on our elections. Weird situation that most people don't even talk about, even though Russiagate is like the most important thing that we're talking about. Secondly, on top of that, we have taken zero initiative, and we've brought up, I think, three policies in the Senate that have never even seen the floor in regards to securing our elections, right? And And the Democrats, unfortunately, don't make a bigger stink about this. They don't really talk about this as much, which is very frustrating to someone like myself. But having said all of this, when people are criticizing Russiagate in the way that Rachel Maddow and mainstream media liberals have portrayed it, making it like the single most important entity that contributed to Hillary Clinton's loss, it's really frustrating to see that, because if calculated and targeted ad buys could sway the election this way, that means you don't have that strong of a candidate to begin with. And that is something
both things can be true, though. Both things can be true. That number one, Hillary Clinton wasn't an ideal candidate, but number two, she probably would
ran
be
a terrible
today were it not for Russian interference. Do you think that Hillary Clinton would have lost it were it not for the WikiLeaks dumps?
Hard to say, because it was narrow. Because it was I mean, I would consider that a narrow.
The WikiLeaks dumps were the main focus of Fox News and far left and far right social media circles.
It's too narrow of a defeat, but like
they started being dumped.
Yeah, it's too narrow of a defeat for me to say, especially if we're talking about like state by state. But it's too narrow for me to say one way or the other. I would not be comfortable saying like it would have not happened. Same with James Comey.
70,000 votes. I mean,
same with James Comey.
James Comey, and the fact that she ran a poor campaign, the fact that she ignored places like Michigan and Pennsylvania, like all that stuff is important, and all those things can be true at the same time. But one thing being true,
I understand, but what was getting broad coverage daily, nightly on MSNBC, CNN, and what was freaking out every single person in liberal media? What was freaking out the media class the most? What was the?
Are you talking about Russiagate right now? Are you talking about in the aftermath of the election? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Exactly. So if it's a really complicated situation, and leftists are saying, well, this is really fucked up. If targeted ad buys could potentially sway the outcome of an election, that means we should probably have a stronger candidate. That means we should probably have a stronger message. That means we should probably campaign a little bit better so we don't lose to a fucking corrupt, bumbling moron like Donald Trump in the way that we did when we already had a qualified candidate, right? A candidate with a good resume that deserved to be there.
I think that's true, but I think that being true doesn't make the Russian interference stuff any less true.
I know,
or concerning.
I know, but if there are numerous different reasons to why Hillary Clinton lost, and mainstream media is exclusively focusing on the Russian narrative, don't you think that it almost seems like they are trying to absolve themselves of any sort of sin for being on board with Hillary Clinton, or trying to absolve Hillary Clinton of any this sort of?
Well, I don't know. I would take issue with being on board with Hillary Clinton. No other issue got more media attention than Hillary Clinton's emails, or the DNC's emails and Podesta's emails. She got more negative coverage than Donald Trump during the 2016 election. He just made a fool of himself, but he got all kinds of free yes, I do think that the media was trying to absolve themselves, but not for the reason that you think. I don't think that they were totally in the tank for Hillary Clinton. They were in the tank for whatever got them ratings. And Donald Trump got them ratings, and Hillary Clinton's emails got him ratings. But then when he got elected, I think yes, you're probably right that a lot of people in mainstream media, all these journalists for all these different companies, tried to pull a mea culpa by immediately pivoting to the Russia stuff. But they were never going to go for someone like Bernie anyways. I'm not excusing that. I'm just saying, like,
that doesn't matter.
If the logic goes that we should be pushing a candidate,
okay, they should have pushed for Martin O'Malley then. You know what I mean? Like, my point is, my point is not like, my point isn't like the media was gonna go for Bernie, but they went for Hillary. My point is, like, we as the Democratic Party, the DNC, has super delegates literally for this reason, so they can influence the outcome of the primaries and pick whoever they think is the most viable candidate who will defeat the Republican candidate. They failed spectacularly. And then the DNC, which, as we know, still has a tremendous amount of influence over a lot of these media outlets that cover politics, ended up not really as exposed as they should have been for their failures. And we just talked about Russia endlessly, and I think that's the main criticism that a lot of people have.
The superdelegate thing is bullshit, and as far as I know, the DNC has since voted to
They
restrict the
did.
power
No,
of
no, no. For
superdelegates. They
just
didn't get rid of them.
hold on. Sorry. Yeah, in a contested primary, they will still they will still have an effect. Hold on. Let me clarify my position. The reason why superdelegates exist to begin with is what I just said, which is that if the popular vote ends up not the popular vote, but if the primaries end up picking like a different candidate than the one that they think is a better choice to defeat the Republican candidate, that's the reason why superdelegates exist.
Yeah,
like,
it's
that's
bullshit.
literally why they did that. That's why they have the superdelegates to begin with. So,
yeah, it's like it reminds me of the point of the Electoral College to a certain extent, on paper at least. But but if you take away the superdelegates, Bernie still lost to Hillary by like 3 million votes.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm not, by the way, I'm critical of Bernie Sanders as well. I think Bernie Sanders also should have campaigned a little bit better. I think Bernie Sanders could have definitely, it would have been nice if Bernie Sanders got the same kind of media coverage that Hillary Clinton had gotten. I think at the peak of this, he was getting like 1/10 the coverage that Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump was getting. That was deliberate. That was 100%
which is ridiculous
deliberate.
because I consider him to be the second most influential modern political figure. Well, he would be like in the top 5. There'd be like Obama, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump, just by virtue of the fact that they were presidents. And then you have Bernie Sanders would definitely be on. He'd probably be like number 4. It's like one of the most influential modern political figures, and he didn't get nearly as much media coverage.
And remember, Hutch, he started off. He announced his run to 30 people. And by the end of it, he had 10 million people backing him. That's tremendous.
He started off polling at like 1 or 2%.
Yeah, that's insane.
Of the most popular,
now he's one of the most popular, one of the most popular politicians in the country, if not the most popular. Has higher approval ratings than Donald Trump and Joe Biden, even though Joe Biden is close to Bernie Sanders for some weird reason. And that all happened over the course of these past 4 years. Why did it happen? Because the media had to cover him. Like, they were forced to cover him. Anyway, so that's part of the reason why Bernie Sanders still ended up losing to Hillary Clinton. And that's part of the reason why Bernie Sanders is not doing so great currently as well. Is that,
well, if this was a contest with people under the age of 35 picking a president, Bernie would win. Easily. He would crush.
I know it's not.
Everybody
it's
else.
not. And
right.
But with the Democratic Party and just in general, the reality is that media does have a tremendous amount of influence over the way that we see potential candidates.
Yeah.
And look at the way that they've excluded Bernie Sanders from the conversation, even when he was in second place, comfortably in second place, and Elizabeth Warren was only picking up points. They would constantly talk about Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden as a matchup, completely excluding Bernie Sanders from the conversation. Originally, they started talking about policies. Elizabeth Warren has a policy for that. She is really policy heavy. Well, Bernie Sanders is one of the most radical platforms, one of the most radical progressive platforms I've ever seen. And he has plenty of policies now, whether it be for housing or criminal justice reform, for example. You rarely ever see that get covered. Why do you think that? It's so strange. All of a sudden, they don't care about policies now that Elizabeth Warren is in second place. So weird.
I think she's gonna get the ticket, man. I think she's gonna get the nomination. I've been saying that for like a month. I've been saying I think maybe I was starting to think that Biden had such a lead in the polls that it would be that would be impossible to that would be insurmountable. But starting like a month or 2 ago, I started giving myself like a kernel of hope that it wouldn't be Biden. And I watched Bernie kind of stagnate in the polls, and I watched Elizabeth Warren surge. Now, my question to you is, if she gets the nomination instead of Bernie, are you going to use your platform to...
Who? Elizabeth Warren?
If Elizabeth Warren gets the nominee over Bernie, are you going to use your platform and are the Young Turks going to use that platform?
I can't speak for Young Turks, but Cenk loves fucking Elizabeth Warren, dude. Are you kidding me? But I would. Of course I would back Elizabeth Warren, dude. Are you kidding me?
Okay. So it's not going to be like...
I still think Elizabeth Warren will probably...
I just don't want the far left to treat Elizabeth Warren like they did Hillary Clinton. I just don't want to see that happen.
That's not the case at all. As a matter of fact, I think that there are, I would say right now at this stage, there are too many people who are comfortable backing Elizabeth Warren over Bernie Sanders, even before the stent stuff that just happened this past week. But no, there are plenty of people in the quote unquote far left that are, they love Elizabeth Warren.
There's a lot of people that don't like her though. A lot of people.
I don't know. I don't know if like a lot of people hate Elizabeth Warren.
Maybe it's just the most vocal people that I see on Twitter, but I see people retweeting.
Okay,
stuff,
here's a good solution to that. Don't pay any attention to people on Twitter. Look, dude. Yesterday, I tweeted out something like, "We need to protect leftist vets at all costs." I have friends that are leftist vets, leftist veterans. I love them. I think it's important that they get highlighted, especially because the prevailing narrative is that the prevailing narrative is that veterans are chuds, right? They're all fucking reactionary. And it is. It kind of is like that. They're all fucking weirdo Republican psychos for the most part. So I said, we need to protect leftist vets at all costs. There were still people to the left of me who were saying, no, they're imperialist murderers. No, they're imperialist murderers. They're warmongers. It doesn't matter. They've murdered people in cold blood. Like, no, you can't take these people seriously, Hutch. You can't take Twitter seriously. You just don't. Just don't take them seriously.
Aren't like 30% of the armed forces Democrats or something? I feel like I read something like that somewhere. I don't think it's 90% Republican.
What is? I didn't say 90% Republican.
Sounded like you did.
No. Also, having said that, TYT is a great example of this. I personally was a part of this. And TYT consistently pushed in the aftermath of Bernie Sanders' loss in the primaries. We consistently pushed for Hillary Clinton. We had long arguments about why it would be silly to vote third party. So
did you?
I hate that this is like the narrative that like TYT is the far left, or I personally was like
I don't know if it's a narrative. I made an assumption, to be honest, but sounds like it was an unfair assumption.
Anyway, and
hey,
regardless,
listen, it was good talking to you. I'm gonna go see Joker though. I gotta get some.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I hope this was informative, and I hope I was able to at least have you see my side of things a little bit better.
Yeah, of course. I enjoy these conversations.
All right.
All right. Bye, Hassan's chat, and bye to you, sir. Have a good night.
Bye, guys.